Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The moment Claire made her move, I realized she thought she'd won. What she didn't know was, I'd already set the trap. We were in the banquet hall at Eastwood Country Club, dressed to the nines and surrounded by polished silverware and smiling faces. It was supposed to be a celebration. Our son Matt had just graduated from law school. Claire had been buzzing about it for weeks. Booked the hall, picked the flowers, coordinated the playlist. I figured she was just being her usual type A self. I should have known better. My name's Mason Riley. I'm 56 years old, live just outside of Columbus, Ohio. And that night started like every other proud father moment. A dozen tables of guests, Matt shaking hands with professors, cousins clinking glasses. I was halfway through a beer when Claire stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. Everyone quieted. She smiled. Not at me, at the back of the room. "I just want to say a few words," she began, holding her champagne flute like she was at a movie premiere. "Matt, we're so proud of you. You've worked hard. You've earned every bit of this. But there's something else I need to share tonight." I turned toward her, expecting maybe a story from his childhood or a tearful anecdote. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I've decided to start a new life without you." Forks hit plates. Someone gasped. Matt's face went ghost white. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then I heard a few chairs squeak as heads turned toward the back of the room, to a man with gelled blonde hair and a skin-tight dress shirt who gave a subtle nod. Tyler, her trainer. He sat with a small group of mutual friends I hadn't seen in months, people who used to come to our barbecues and suddenly stopped answering my texts. I guess now I knew why. Claire didn't wait for a reaction. She raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice steady. I stood. Not because I was mad. I wasn't. Not because I was going to fight or beg. I just stood there, let the silence stretch a beat longer, then smiled. "Thanks for the heads up," I said. Somewhere in the back, someone coughed. Claire blinked, thrown off by my calm. I slid my hand beneath the edge of the table and tapped the envelope I'd placed under her salad plate earlier that evening. She hadn't noticed it. Not yet. She smirked and sat back down like she'd delivered a flawless performance, but her hand brushed the envelope as she reached for her napkin. She paused, picked it up. That's when I looked her straight in the eyes and gave her a smile she didn't know how to read. Not smug, not angry, just ready. Matt was still frozen, staring between us. Claire glanced at the envelope, then back at me. Her fingers tightened around it. "I'll be in touch," she said, standing again. She didn't look at Tyler, just started toward the exit. I stayed at the table. Matt turned to me. "Dad, what just happened?" I patted his arm and said, "Finish your drink. I'll fill you in tonight." What Claire didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that I'd been counting down to this exact night for months. She thought she'd taken control, but I'd already pulled the plug on everything she thought she had lined up. And that envelope? That was just the opening shot. After the banquet, I drove home in silence. No music, no news, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. I should have been angry, I guess. But the truth was, I'd already been through that. The shock, the heartbreak, the confusion, that had all come months earlier. By the time Claire made her little announcement, I was past it. I'm Mason Riley, 56 years old, and up until that night, I'd spent nearly 3 decades playing the part of the good husband. I showed up, I paid the bills, I did the work no one saw, not just at the office, but at home. When Claire wanted to start her boutique, I didn't hesitate. I pushed pause on the consulting firm I'd been building, put in extra hours at the finance job I was trying to leave, liquidated an investment account to cover her lease, told myself it was love. She opened her shop in downtown Worthington, had a ribbon cutting and everything. I stood next to her in the pictures, hand on her back, proud smile fixed on my face. When she wanted to expand, open a second location in Dayton, I ran the numbers 3 different ways, told her it was risky. She said I didn't believe in her. So I co-signed the lease, covered the supplier invoices when her cards bounced, and took out a home equity line to make the books balance. That second shop folded in under 6 months. She blamed the timing, the economy, the location, everything but herself. I didn't argue. I just absorbed the hit and moved on. But something shifted after that. She stopped asking for advice, stopped checking in, started staying late at the studio more often. At first, I assumed she was trying to rebuild, hustling harder. I wanted to believe that. Then I started noticing things. Little things at first. Cash withdrawals I didn't remember making. Venmo payments labeled tea lunch or studio help at weird hours. Gas charges in cities I knew she hadn't told me she was visiting. One time, I checked our joint account and saw 2 hotel charges within the same week. Both midday, both 100 miles away from her store. I wanted to confront her. God, I almost did. So many times. But something stopped me. A little voice in the back of my head kept saying, "Don't yell, don't accuse, document." So I started collecting. At night when she was asleep, or pretending to be, I'd pull out my laptop and go through the bank statements, cross-reference them with her calendar, matched gas receipts with cell phone location data from the family plan. It wasn't hard. I'm not a hacker, but I'm good with numbers, and patterns don't lie. That's when I found it. A second account. Her name only. Tied to the same bank as ours, but opened separately. I spotted it by accident. A transfer memo that didn't match any of our usual bills. Dug deeper, found more. Turns out she'd been quietly siphoning money from our business credit line. Funds that were supposed to go toward boutique expenses. Some transfers were small. $50 here, $100 there. Others were in the thousands. All routed to that second account over the course of almost a year. And here's the kicker. Some of it was tied to my own income stream. The payroll from a side contract I'd picked up last fall. She'd rerouted the direct deposit to a shared fund and skimmed off the top before I even saw it hit our main account. That's when the anger came back. Slow, cold, and sharp. I stared at the monitor that night, the numbers lighting up like a trail of breadcrumbs. I sat there for hours. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Just kept clicking. Kept digging. Claire thought she was being slick. But I've spent my whole life spotting leaks before they flood. And this time, I wasn't patching anything. I was getting ready to blow the whole thing wide open. I didn't sleep much after I found that second account. It wasn't the betrayal. Not really. That part had already settled in my chest like a rock. It was the logistics, the questions, the math, and the fact that Claire thought she was getting away with it. That's what kept me awake. The next morning, I made one phone call. Darren Caldwell. Old buddy of mine from back when I was still doing corporate audits. Forensic accountant now. The kind of guy who could find a penny in a haystack and tell you what year it was minted. I didn't give him every detail. Just said I needed help verifying some questionable transactions. We met at a diner off Route 23. Same booth we used to sit in during late-night number crunching back in the day. He sipped his coffee, gave me that look. "Is this about your wife?" I didn't answer, just slid him a flash drive. 3 days later, he called me. "Yeah, Mason, you're going to want to sit down." She wasn't just skimming. She was draining. Over 52 grand had been shuffled out of our joint business accounts into the private one. Some of it straight from the boutique's credit line, some from personal accounts she'd routed through dummy expenses. It was all dressed up in fake invoices and vague labels. Inventory replacement, vendor reimbursements, equipment returns. But the money wasn't going to vendors. It was going to a down payment on a lakefront condo in Huron. Lease in her name. Ann Tyler's. That part nearly made me laugh. Tyler. The guy who charged $60 a session to yell at middle-aged women on yoga mats. He was on the lease like he was a co-founder of her new life. She had a Gmail account she didn't know I'd discovered, thanks to a botched backup sync on her phone. I found emails to a real estate agent with the subject line, "Freedom after graduation." That was the phrase she kept using. Freedom. Like I was the warden. Like our marriage had been a sentence and she'd circled the graduation date on a calendar, waiting for the day she could cut loose and run off with a guy who wore tank tops in December. Worse yet, she wasn't acting alone. Her friend Julie, the one she always called her ride or die, was an attorney at a mid-sized firm in town. Apparently, Julie had helped Claire structure some of the transfers. Probably thought she was being slick about it. But she used her work email. Big mistake. Darren flagged it all. Every dime, every move. The beauty of it was, Claire had completely forgotten about the prenup. Or maybe she thought it didn't matter anymore. She'd made me sign it back in the day, when I still owned a stake in a logistics startup and she was just launching her boutique from our garage. She was worried I'd leave her with nothing if we ever split. Ironically, that prenup turned out to be my greatest asset. Clause 14. Loyalty clause. Infidelity, financial or romantic, nullified any spousal claim to shared assets. It didn't expire, it wasn't negotiable, and it didn't matter who made more money now. The only thing that mattered was what we'd both agreed to then. So, I got to work. For 3 months, I smiled at breakfast, kissed her cheek, paid the bills, and behind her back, I documented everything. Every text she sent to T, every blurry gym mirror selfie she accidentally uploaded to our shared iCloud, every credit card purchase that didn't make sense, like the boutique charging for client services at a steakhouse in Cincinnati while her appointment book was empty. I kept records, screenshots, voice memos. I even took a weekend trip, told her I was going on a fishing trip with Matt, and used that time to meet with a lawyer I trusted. Quietly filed the initial divorce paperwork. Had the accounts frozen with a court order. Moved most of our assets to a new trust with Matt as the sole beneficiary. By the time Claire gave that toast, by the time she stood there in heels and smiled like she'd landed the final blow, I was already 10 moves ahead. She thought she'd caught me off guard. Truth is, I was counting down to that night like a soldier waiting for the order. The envelope I slid under her plate, it wasn't just a letter. It was a signal, a clock starting, and every tick after that would be the sound of her life unraveling. I didn't stick around to make small talk after Claire dropped her bomb. I slipped out the side door while people were still picking their jaws off their plates, left my jacket on the back of the chair, and didn't even say goodbye to Matt. Not because I was angry at him, but because I didn't want that night etched into his memory more than it already was. The drive home was quick. No traffic, no music, just the soft whine of tires on pavement and the occasional buzz from my phone lighting up the passenger seat. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a moment, just looking at the house. The Craftsman we bought 12 years ago. Blue siding, brick porch light that flickered when it rained. I remembered when Claire first walked through it, said it felt like a forever house. Back then, I believed her. Inside, everything was quiet. I went straight to the bedroom and opened the closet. Sure enough, 2 duffel bags sat neatly on her side, the same ones she used on yoga retreats. She'd already packed. She must have thought she'd leave first thing in the morning, maybe after collecting a few pity hugs and reassurances from her friends. She never thought I'd beat her to the punch. I'd changed the alarm codes that morning. Had the locksmith scheduled for Saturday to rekey every lock, garage remote, and deadbolt. I even updated the Nest permissions so her phone wouldn't get access. Her name wasn't on the deed. Never was. When we bought the place, I paid the down payment in full from an inheritance. She laughed it off at the time, said it didn't matter, we were a team, paperwork was boring. I offered to add her name later. She waved it off. "Why bother?" she said, curling into me on the old plaid couch we had back then. "I'm not going anywhere." I sat on the porch with a whiskey in my hand, watching the sky fade into purple. My phone buzzed nonstop. Some friends from the party, I guessed. One of them left a voicemail that started with, "Hey man, wow." Then Shannon texted, "Claire's sister. She finally told you?" Like she'd known for a while. Probably had. Claire always acted like Shannon was just another chaotic single woman with too many cats and too little filter, but they were closer than I gave them credit for. The way she worded it, finally, told me she'd been in on the secret, or at least enough of it. I didn't reply to her. I only texted Matt. "This isn't your mess. Enjoy your day. I'll fill you in tonight." I meant it too. He didn't deserve to be pulled into this garbage pile of adult failure. Not after all the work he'd put into making that day matter. He was a Riley. Steady, driven, kind. He deserved peace, not drama. I stayed out on the porch until the bottle was a quarter lighter. Watched the neighbor's motion light flick on and off as raccoons tried to break into their trash again. Kept my phone face down after that. Claire thought she'd ruined my life with a public ambush and a new boy toy. She thought she'd walk out, high heels clicking, into her new condo with her head held high. She didn't know I'd already dismantled the whole foundation beneath her feet. And come morning, when she tried to use her key and it didn't work, that would be the first of many doors closing in her face. She showed up around 2 in the afternoon, didn't even knock. I was in the kitchen, finishing a sandwich, when the front door swung open and slammed against the wall. Claire stormed in like she still lived there, red-faced, breathing hard, holding the envelope like it was radioactive. "You filed today?" she barked. "You froze the money?" I wiped my hands on a napkin and turned around slow. She looked unhinged, hair pulled back in a half-done ponytail, keys still swinging from one hand, the envelope clutched tight in the other. "How could you do this to me?" she snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "You made your choice," I said. "I'm just speeding up the timeline." She blinked, stunned for half a second, then went off again. "You had no right. Mason, this is marital property. You can't just take everything and lock me out." "There are laws, and I have—" "Section 14, I cut in, page 6 of the prenup. Loyalty clause triggers full forfeiture of spousal claim, remember?" She went pale. For a second, I thought she might actually sit down. But instead, she started shaking her head like a kid refusing medicine. "That expired," she said weakly. "It's been too long. It's not enforceable anymore." I pulled my phone from the counter, tapped a couple times, then held it up to her. I had my attorney confirm it twice. Still valid, still binding. She took a half step back. I opened my voice recorder app and tapped play. The audio wasn't loud, but in the dead quiet of the kitchen, every word echoed like a hammer hitting drywall. Her voice, giggles, and Tyler's, mumbling something about the lease deposit. Then her again. "Once Matt's graduation's done, I'm out. He has no clue. Still pays all the bills like I'm cooking dinner every night. It's actually kind of sad." She lunged forward. "Turn that off." I stepped back. "You don't get to yell in my kitchen after trying to rob me blind." Her mouth opened, then shut again. Her eyes darted around like she was trying to find a foothold. You can't use that in court. That's a violation of privacy." "Nope," I said calmly. "State's a one-party consent law. You uploaded it to the cloud we share. You gave me access." She looked like she'd swallowed glass. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I set the phone down and folded my arms. "You want to talk about rights, Claire? Let's talk about that boutique you opened with my money. The second location you blamed on bad timing. The account you opened behind my back. The one you and Julie used to shuffle money into that condo rental." Her face twitched at Julie's name. "I have emails," I added, "and screenshots, and itemized statements from the forensic accountant I hired 3 months ago." She looked ready to scream, but no sound came out. "I already submitted everything to my attorney. Bank fraud, misuse of marital funds, intent to conceal assets. You don't just lose your cut. You could have lost a lot more." She turned away from me, pacing now, muttering to herself. I could hear pieces of it. I wasn't trying to... And then something about just needed space. That part made me laugh. Not out loud, but in my head. She spun back toward me. "Why didn't you just confront me?" I tilted my head. "You wanted a clean break, remember? Freedom after graduation? I gave you exactly what you planned for, just a little ahead of schedule." She sank into the kitchen chair like someone had unplugged her. I stood there, watching her breathe heavy, watching her try to piece together a new angle, a new story. But it was over. She just didn't know how to admit it yet. "You always thought you were smarter than me," I said quietly. "And maybe for a while you were, but not anymore. I stopped playing your game, Claire. I wrote my own rules, and this time I'm finishing the story." She looked up at me, eyes rimmed red, face stripped of the smugness she wore like a second skin. She thought she could still spin the narrative, but the final draft, that was already typed, printed, and signed. He showed up just after 9. I heard his car in the driveway, the way it idled for a few seconds before he killed the engine. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. He didn't want to be here, but he came anyway. When I opened the door, he looked tired. Not physically, but worn in a way you don't fix with sleep. His shoulders were tight, his eyes searching my face like he was hoping I'd crack first. "She said you snapped," he said, skipping hello. "Said you froze the accounts out of spite, that you got paranoid and started accusing her of cheating without proof." I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat in the den, the same room where we used to watch movies on Friday nights when he was younger. Claire asleep on the couch halfway through the opening credits. Now it felt cold, like none of that ever happened. I didn't give a speech, didn't ask how he was feeling. I just handed him a manila folder and said, "Start wherever you want." He opened it slowly. Inside were copies of the bank records, the transfers, the second account, the boutique funds disappearing one payment at a time. I watched his eyes flick from line to line. Then he found the email printouts, the messages between Claire and Tyler, the receipts from the condo application. All of it. No emotion, just data. Matt swallowed hard. Jesus. He looked up at me, but I didn't say a word, just waited. She said, "You never supported her dreams." His voice cracked a little on that one. "That you didn't believe in her second shop. That you shut her down every time she tried to grow." I stood, walked over to the side table, and grabbed another stack of papers, set them in front of him. Credit card statements, from last year, all of them in my name. He flipped through. Advertising costs, inventory purchases, rent on 2 locations. 1 month had over $9,000 in charges. "I didn't just support her," I said quietly. "I buried my own business to fund hers, even when I knew it was bleeding out." Matt didn't respond. He just kept staring at the numbers. "And when the shop collapsed," I added, "she wanted to dip into your college fund to keep it afloat." That got his attention. He looked up, eyes wide. "What?" I said no, I told him. "Moved it to a new account. Used my own savings to cover your last 2 semesters. She never knew, didn't ask." He leaned back like the air had been knocked out of him. "She said you were cold," he whispered after a long pause, "that you never tried to fix things between you two." I reached for the final envelope on the table. Therapy receipts, weekly sessions, marriage counselor we both agreed on. Claire went 6 times, then stopped showing up. Claimed she was too busy with the shop. I kept going for 3 more weeks until the therapist said I needed to accept when someone stops meeting you halfway. I handed the receipts to Matt. He stared at them for a long time, then rubbed his face with both hands. "I don't even know what to think right now," he said. "I feel like none of this makes sense." I didn't push. I just said, "Take your time." He nodded, barely. Then he stood up, folder still in hand. At the door he hesitated, looked at me like he was 5 years old again, scared to ask a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "I need time," he said finally. "I know," I said. He left without another word. The next morning, just after 7, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. One message from Matt. "You were right." She played us both. I sat there staring at it for a long time. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. But for the first time in a while, I exhaled. The first hearing landed on a Tuesday morning. I wore the same gray suit I'd had for years. Nothing flashy, just clean and sharp. Claire showed up 10 minutes late with a man in a navy pinstripe suit who walked in like he thought he owned the courtroom. Her new lawyer, the one she said came highly recommended by a friend from the studio. He didn't look so confident when I handed over the prenup. The judge took less than 20 minutes to review the documents. Section 14, breach of fidelity, clearly outlined. Not buried, not vague. My attorney, an older woman named Carol, who barely spoke but knew the law like it was gospel, sat back and let the paperwork do the talking. Claire's lawyer tried to object, said something about intent and emotional strain. The judge raised an eyebrow and asked if he had any evidence to dispute the proof of infidelity or the financial misconduct outlined in our filings. He didn't. Claire didn't look at me once, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands in her lap. But when the judge ruled in my favor, awarding me full retention of the house, my full retirement portfolio, and 75% of the joint investments, she flinched. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. She hadn't read the fine print. I had. Court adjourned just after 10. I walked out without a glance in her direction. By noon, Tyler had blocked her on social media. A mutual acquaintance sent me the screenshots. Claire's relationship status vanished overnight, and his profile went back to solo gym pics and protein shake promos. He wasn't in it for love. He wanted the condo, the boutique, the lifestyle she'd promised him off my dime. Claire sent a text 2 days later. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Shannon called instead. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Her voice was weirdly neutral, like she was trying not to sound either smug or sympathetic. "She's back at Mom's," she said. "Says she needs time to regroup." "Regroup what?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Honestly," Shannon said, "I think she thought Tyler would stick around. He didn't. And, the boutique's in trouble." Trouble was putting it lightly. A month later, I passed the storefront on my way to a client lunch. Windows papered over, handwritten sign taped to the glass. Closed until further notice. It didn't reopen. Word got around. Suppliers hadn't been paid. Rent was 4 months behind. She'd taken out a small business loan using forged signatures. My name was on the guarantor line, one I never signed. I flagged it with my lawyer, filed a report, and let the bank deal with the rest. People started talking. The same mutual friends who clinked glasses with her at the graduation party now whispered behind closed doors. One woman from her yoga group emailed me to say she felt duped. Another left a voicemail saying she had no idea Claire was like that. I didn't bother replying. It didn't matter. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one explaining myself. I wasn't the one picking up the pieces. Claire had spent years building a version of herself that looked good from the outside. Polished, driven, independent. But when the money stopped and the mask slipped, people saw what I had been living with for years. And all it took was one court date, a few bank records, and a little patience. Funny how truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits, then knocks everything down. I never planned to go back to work full-time. After everything, I figured I'd coast for a while, maybe do some consulting here and there. Nothing serious, just enough to stay sharp. But then, I had a conversation at the gym. It was a Tuesday morning, early, quiet, just me and a few other guys in the weight room. One of them, Jeff, a contractor I'd nodded to in passing for years, sat down beside me on the bench and said, "You still married?" I told him no. He nodded like he already knew. "Yeah," he said. "Mine just left. Took half of everything too." I didn't see it coming. 2 days later, he came by my house with a folder full of bank statements and a look I recognized, confused, embarrassed, angry, and tired. That's how Riley and Company was reborn. I dusted off the LLC, updated the website, and got to work. My niche? Helping men like Jeff, middle-aged, financially stable, but legally unprepared. Guys who'd spent 20 years building something, only to watch it start unraveling because they never thought they'd need to protect themselves. My first 3 clients all came from that same gym. None of them were idiots, just blindsided. Guys who'd traded ambition for stability, who didn't realize the rules had changed until it was too late. It felt good to be useful again. Not just smart for my age or helpful around the house, but useful. The kind of useful that made other people's lives stop spinning. Matt started calling again. At first it was just quick check-ins, updates on work, small talk about a Browns game we both knew neither of us really cared about. But they got longer. Then he asked if he could swing by. One afternoon, he showed up with takeout, my favorite. Ribs from Hudson's and a cold lemonade. We ate on the porch. "You know," he said between bites, "I used to think folding meant weakness. Like when people gave up, left jobs, left marriages, like they'd failed." He paused. "But you didn't fold," he said. "You recalculated." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and passed him a napkin. He came by more after that. Not every week, but enough. Sometimes he brought laundry, sometimes a six-pack. He didn't talk about Claire much. Neither did I. That silence felt like progress. Eventually, I moved Riley and Company into a real office. Nothing huge, just a two-room suite in a low-rise near downtown, next to a chiropractor and across from a bakery that made dangerous cinnamon rolls. I hired a part-time assistant, Leanne, early 40s, sharp as hell, former paralegal with a no-nonsense voice and a surprisingly dark sense of humor. She kept the place humming. And me? I worked, built systems, took calls, helped men restructure trusts, trace hidden accounts, file clean exits. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was building something real. One Thursday, I got an email from a woman named Zoe Kramer. She wrote for a local business journal, said she'd heard about me through a client, liked the story, wanted to feature me in a piece about resilience entrepreneurship. At first I thought it was spam, but she followed up, sent a link to her past work, and mentioned my name had come up more than once during her interviews. "You're kind of a quiet legend," she wrote, "the man who turned betrayal into a business." I agreed to meet for coffee. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, asked good questions and didn't sugarcoat things. By the end of the interview, she said, "You don't seem bitter." "I'm not," I told her. "I'm just free." And I meant it. I hadn't just survived the collapse. I'd used it as kindling. And from that fire, I built something no one could take away. It was raining that morning. Not a thunderstorm, just a slow, steady drizzle that turned everything gray and quiet. Fitting, really. The final court date landed on what would have been our 28th anniversary. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before going in. Watched people hustle through the courthouse doors with umbrellas and folders clutched to their chests. No one looked happy to be there. Claire arrived late. Not by much, maybe 5 minutes, but enough to make an entrance. No lawyer this time. She walked in alone, hair pulled back, makeup smudged, blouse wrinkled like it came from the floor of her car. She looked tired. Not just physically, like the weight of all the games, all the pretending, had finally caught up to her. She didn't look at me. Not once. The hearing itself lasted less than 15 minutes. The clerk read off the terms, asked us to confirm our agreement, stamped some forms. Claire signed without comment. No argument, no eye contact. Just pen to paper, then gone. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of that courthouse and stood on the sidewalk under the overhang, watching the rain for a while. People came and went behind me, shuffling papers, checking their watches. I just stood there, letting the finality of it settle in my chest. It didn't feel triumphant or sad. It felt like closing a long, expensive book, one I never planned to reread. That night, a few people reached out. Some mutual friends, a couple neighbors. One guy, Dan, tried to walk the line, said he didn't want to take sides. I told him he didn't have to. The truth already did that for him. Most people drifted away from her after everything came out. She stopped showing up at the gym, deleted her social media for a while. I heard she got a part-time job at a garden center out by her mom's place. Not sure if that's true, but I didn't care enough to check. Then Shannon emailed. "You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner. I thought she'd come to her senses." I didn't reply. I appreciated it, but what was left to say? That weekend, Matt and I went fishing at Buckeye Lake. Just the two of us, like old times. We got up early, packed sandwiches, didn't even check the forecast. He didn't bring up his mom, neither did I. We didn't need to. We fished in silence most of the morning, passed a bag of chips back and forth, argued about which station to put on the truck's Bluetooth. It was simple, easy. I used to think being alone would kill me, that if Claire ever left, I'd fall apart. I had built a life with someone who slowly convinced me I couldn't handle one without her. Funny thing is, she left, and I didn't fall. I got up, cleaned house, started fresh, and in the silence that followed the mess, I found something I hadn't heard in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from getting even. The kind that comes from finally being done. 6 months later, Riley and Company was humming. We weren't some big firm with glass walls and catered lunches. Just me, Leanne, a few folding chairs in the waiting area, and a whiteboard I never erased because I liked the mess of it. But the client list kept growing. Word spread, mostly through whispers at gyms and golf courses. Talk to Mason. He's been through it. He'll show you how to land on your feet. I got invited to speak at a divorce law conference in Cleveland. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I'm not a lawyer, never even played one on TV, but they said they wanted real stories, financial guidance, practical insight. So I agreed. Told my story in a quiet room full of tired men and skeptical lawyers. When I finished, no one clapped. They just nodded, like I'd said something they'd been waiting to hear. Afterward, 3 people pulled me aside for advice. 2 of them ended up booking sessions. Claire used to say I was boring, said I lacked spontaneity. But that office, that talk, that steady line of people who finally felt seen, that wasn't boring. That was mine. I finally bought the truck, too. A used Tacoma, navy blue, low mileage, clean inside and out. I'd been putting it off for years, telling myself there were more important things to pay for. Now, I just paid for it. No debate, no guilt. It wasn't flashy, but it did the job. Kind of like me. Matt came by one Saturday with a friend from work, a woman named Erin. He didn't call it a setup, just said they'd been grabbing lunch nearby and wanted to say hi. I saw the way she looked at him first before she looked at me, like she was checking to see if he'd approved of me before making her own judgment. We all sat out back, shared iced tea and barbecue, talked about nothing important. She laughed at my jokes. I liked her laugh. Later, Matt texted me, "She said you seem grounded. That's a compliment." I replied, "I'm starting to feel that way. We've had coffee since, not a date. Just coffee. We'll see. I sleep better now. Eat better, too. I started cooking again. Simple stuff, nothing fancy. A little salmon, some roasted veggies. I don't miss the eggshells. I don't miss wondering which version of her would walk in the door that night. The silence in the house doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels earned. The other night, I opened the drawer where I keep old receipts and warranties, the kind of drawer that gets stuffed and ignored for years. Tucked in the back was the original copy of that prenup. Claire's signature, neat and confident, right under mine. I stared at it for a minute, then I laughed. Out of all the things she gave me, the chaos, the debt, the lies, that prenup ended up being the best gift of all. She'd made me sign it thinking she was protecting herself from me. In the end, it protected me from her. That envelope I slid under her plate at the banquet, that wasn't just paperwork. That was the first thing I'd done in years entirely for myself. Not for peace, not to keep things smooth, but because I was done letting someone else hold the pen to my life. Sometimes your whole life burns down. And when the smoke clears, the first thing you build back is dignity.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.